It is possible to eliminate the fear of rushing or dragging. We're humans, not robots, so our time is never truly going to be perfect, but we can at least get it as close as possible and not worry about it. And honestly, we can get a lot closer to perfect timekeeping when we learn how to keep time the right way. We learn how to practice these things the right way. Believe it or not, this sometimes means ditching the metronome. So I'll show you how this works. Let's dig in. Hey, there's nothing more core to your drumming skill than mastering the hands. And if that's something that you feel might be a weakness, like if you've got a weak hand, you got a speed wall, you don't really know how to use your fingers, things feel too stiff, check out the free guide in the description, the Fast Fluid Hands Checklist. It can help you solve all of that. Unlock your hands for maximum speed, control, and volume in 4 simple steps. It's just check boxes. These are the things you need to do, look out for. This is something you can learn that you can do, and it'll definitely change your playing. Okay, let's get on with today's lesson. Here's what we want to do. We want to practice the songs that we're going to be performing without a metronome. So we actually want to practice without a metronome. Now, you might be like, what, Stephen, what are you talking about? Because we need to practice to a metronome in order to build our time and have that internal clock. So why would we want to practice not with a metronome? Why would we actually want to ditch our metronome to somehow increase our time sense? Well, there's a few reasons. One of these, if you think about it, most gigs that you're going to play, you're not playing to a click. Most of the time, if you're just playing with your band, you're playing in a restaurant, bar, whatever, you're not going to be playing to a click. So you need to practice not playing to a click, but still having good time. So what that means is that there's a progression, an order of steps that we want to go through in our practicing. And the first one is play through whatever groove, passage, song, whatever, just you on the drums. You're not listening to anything, nothing going on in the headphones. You're just playing it. You're remembering how the song goes. Record or video yourself doing that, no click. Go back and watch it, listen to it, and figure out what your tendencies are. Like, did I speed up going into the chorus? Or did the chorus drag? Sometimes it's easy to rush going into a chorus and then drag, lay back once it gets going. And so what you want to know is, what are my tendencies? Where do I tend to rush? Where do I tend to drag? So that you can be intentional about fixing those things. And so once you know those, then you can practice the same song with the metronome going at the tempo of the song, of course, and practice staying right with the click. And so you'll notice, whoa, the click is keeping me from speeding up going into this chorus, or okay, the click is now keeping me from laying back once I get going into the chorus. And so the click is there to keep you honest. But you wouldn't have been expecting those things. You wouldn't have known to focus on those spots had you not made that recording with no click and gone back and evaluated yourself so that you knew your tendencies. That's very important. That's very key here. You've got to know what your tendencies are so that you can actually know how to fix them. This is literally the same as you have to know what the problem is in order to fix the problem. You have to know what your timing issues are. What are your timing problems? Do you tend to rush fills? Do you tend to drag after a big build? Like as you get louder, do you tend to drag? Sometimes that can happen. Or sometimes it's the other way around where you get louder and you tend to rush. Everybody's different. And so you want to know what those tendencies are so you can actively fix them. So in this lesson, we went straight into the nitty-gritty. Those are some action steps. Do those things, follow those steps of evaluating yourself, because that's huge. Ultimately, what we want to do, though, is we want to wean ourselves off the metronome so we can get to where we can still play well in time as if there's a metronome going, but yet there's not. And so we have to practice going from practicing to a metronome to maybe less metronome, like it's clicking less, until eventually it's not clicking at all, but we're still staying in time. And so there's an exercise. This is nothing new. Drummers have been doing this forever. I just call it the metronome weaning exercise, where you start off playing with an eighth note click or a quarter note click, and then you gradually decrease the number of clicks, where then you go to half notes where the metronome only clicks on 1, 3. So you only have those 2 clicks per measure to stay with, and then cut out that second one so that it's only clicking 1. You only have a click at the beginning of each measure, beginning of every 4 counts. That's tough to stay with, but what happens when you practice doing that is you get much more in tune with how you're sounding, and you begin to feel the time. That's how you develop your internal feel for time, where you're not just listening to a click. You're not letting the click be your crutch. You don't want it to be a crutch. but the click can become a powerful tool when you use it this way, where there's less of it. And so you're weaning yourself off of it, and in doing that, you're learning to listen more to yourself and pay attention to where your backbeats are landing. Is your right foot staying in time, making sure that fill feels really good and is steady. And then the click is just there to tell you, hey man, you rushed a little bit, or bro, you really dragged that. And so you've got the click there. It's kind of like that like that character on your shoulder telling you, that wasn't so good, do better next time. But you've got that honest feedback, but yet it's not a crutch. And so there's that sweet spot where maybe it's just having your metronome play on downbeats. Most metronome apps will do that. I know I've got Tempo Advanced, that one does. I don't know about some of the other free ones. Tempo Advanced is a couple bucks, that's my favorite metronome app. Also in Ableton that I have on my computer, I can do that same thing where I can control how many times it's clicking per measure. Also, you could just set it incredibly slow. Like if, say you're practicing a groove at 100 beats a minute and you want the metronome only on the downbeats, set it to 25 beats a minute if your metronome goes that slow. So literally that's a fourth of the tempo, so it's only gonna click downbeats if you're playing a groove at 100. So just do the math, however you wanna make that work. That's a great way to practice this. What can also be really fun, just a fun musical way to improve your time, is to practice along the groove tracks. If you're a Mac user, then you've got GarageBand. And so in GarageBand, there are Apple loops, and what you can do is just throw together, like put a guitar loop on the track, and generally you can set it to any tempo, or a bass track, or a percussion track, whatever. And so whatever style you're working on, you can throw that together with Apple loops and then practice along to that, knowing that it's exactly in time. So it gives you something that's perfectly timed to practice to that isn't just a robotic click. Or if you're not a Mac user, that's fine, go to YouTube, and sometimes you're on YouTube right now. While you're on YouTube, after you watch this video, search like practice, like bass practice tracks, or let's say you're doing like a Latin thing, salsa rhythm track, or a rock rhythm track. That might be a good phrasing to type in, rhythm track. So you'll find like instrumental, sort of like backing tracks, but just loops that you can play along to, like a bass loop you can just play to that loops over and over again. And so you can find whatever style you're looking for, and you can just play along to that. And so that can be a really good, really fun way to practice too. And of course, there's playing along with recordings, playing along with your favorite songs. You do have to be careful, because if your favorite songs are from the 70s or from the 60s, then they probably didn't record to a click, so the timing probably isn't super solid. Once we got into the 80s, then bands started using drum machines and having to actually record to the grid. And so music generally got more metronomically tight then. There are always exceptions, like Nirvana and Foo Fighters traditionally haven't recorded to a click into the 90s and 2000s. So there's always exceptions, but whatever music you're practicing to, check whether or not a metronome can line up with it, just so that you know whether or not it is on the grid, to the grid. And if not, that's okay, just know that it's not going to be perfect. Ideally, you want to find songs to practice to that were recorded to a click, so that you're working that metronomic precision. Now, speaking of recordings, ultimately this is all about the music. We want to have good time so that we can be better drummers, play better with other people, and just be rock solid, because that's the number one thing that other musicians look for in a drummer. If you want to be a good drummer who gets called for the gig, have good time. Be easy to play along with. Don't be that drummer that's all shaky. So besides listening to ourselves to keep our time steady, what else can we be listening to? What other mindset should we have going into a gig when we're playing with other musicians to make sure that we're tight and that our playing is together? And that there's not stress surrounding this. That was the whole point of the title, how to not fear playing out of time again. We're not perfect. We're humans, we're not robots, so we're never going to have perfect time, and you have to be okay with that. But we want to have our time feel so good that you don't really notice if it's slightly out of time. And most importantly, we don't want to fear rushing or dragging. We don't want that to be something we're constantly worried about and we're all tense about. So this final step is really going to help you eliminate that fear. Listen to the melodies of the songs that you're playing, and listen to the other musicians around you. When you're doing that, when you're listening to what's going around you, you're kind of getting outside of your own head. And sometimes that helps you get outside of your own insecurities and fears and stresses and worries, and help you be more in the moment. And when you're listening more to what's going on around you, that actually helps naturally keep you more in time, especially if the musicians around you have good time. I know there's a lot of settings where maybe the guitar player is rushing and maybe the singer's pocket isn't great. And so there are those things you have to deal with. But for the most part, if you're listening to what's going on around you, even if the time fluctuates a little bit, you're going to be gelling with the other band members better, which is going to make the overall band's time feel better, even if it's not perfect. You always want to be tightly playing with the bass player, guitar, singer. Everybody needs to be locked together, and that cannot happen without everyone listening. So it's not just on you as the drummer. They've got to be listening to you too. And so that might be a conversation you have to have. But everybody's got to listen to each other and make sure they're all feeling the time together, even if it's not perfect. And so listening is a huge part of this. But all that to say, if you're nervous going into a playing situation, listen to what's going on around you. Get out of your own head. Stop worrying about what you're doing. Listen to what's going on around you. If you're insecure about the people you're playing with, what people are thinking of you, you're afraid of mistakes, listen to what's going on around you. If you blank on what's next in the song and you're like, I have no idea what's coming up next, relax, listen to what's going on around you. And if you're confident and you're comfortable and you know what you're doing and you know the songs and you're like, yeah, I'm sounding good, don't get cocky. Listen to what's going on around you. That is the answer to so many things, where when you've got drumming fundamentals together, that next step is always listening. And the more you can be listening to the music around you, paying attention to what's going on around you, the more relaxed you can become, the more in the moment you can become, the less worried you become about what people think of you, what you sound like, because you're just listening. If you're relaxed and you're listening, you're going to naturally sound good because you're not worrying about details of what you're playing. That's where you want to be. So you want to have your technique to a level that you're able to do that. You're able to shift focus, because once you're able to intentionally shift your listening to outside of yourself, your playing naturally syncs up musically with the song and with the people you're playing with. That's what we want. That's the key to being a musical drummer. And of course, it's the key to not worrying about time. As soon as you're at that place where you can do that, you don't have to ever fear rushing or dragging. I remember a time when I was always paranoid about that. I was always worried about, am I dragging? And somebody in the band would tell me, hey man, you were dragging there. And that would just make me even more insecure about it. And so I would be paranoid about it and trying to compensate, like, okay, I need to speed up here so that I don't drag, or I need to drag here so I don't speed up. And I didn't feel in control of that. But as soon as you can get comfortable enough behind the kit, from a technical standpoint, you can then listen better. When you listen better, you relax and you no longer have to fear playing out of time. If you follow these steps we've gone through today, I can guarantee you, you're not going to have to fear playing out of time. Now, there is one more step, and I've alluded to this the last couple minutes here, that you do have to have your playing to a technical level that you're able to shift your focus to listening. And so it's possible that if you don't really have your grip together, like if you don't have smooth rebound happening, where your sticks are just smoothly gliding from drum to drum, if that's not happening, then it's very possible that you could try and work through everything we've covered today and still not have smooth time, because a lot of that does start with the fundamentals of grip. Smooth grip will lead to better time. You may have heard me say that if you've watched many of these lessons before. Smooth grip leads to better time because your playing becomes more physics driven. When your playing is physics driven, it's like the pendulum of a clock, where it's just going to swing back and forth smoothly and stay in time. As soon as we introduce our human nature into things, it's going to become inconsistent, because we are inconsistent. We're not perfect. But physics, that's pretty perfect. You know, the earth spins at the same rate constantly. It's in motion, it keeps spinning. Physics are pretty consistent. Gravity is pretty consistent. Rebound is pretty consistent. And so if you can rely on those things, have a loose grip, then that's naturally going to make your timing much better. And when you combine that with everything we went through today, I know we went through a lot of steps, a lot of action steps, action-packed lesson today, but if your grip is in good shape and you go through everything we worked on today, that's condensing years worth of time spent for me trying to get my time better, and hopefully I'm saving you years worth of time, because that's going to help you tremendously. Now, I know we didn't get into details and mechanics of grip and motion today, but if that's where you're at, if you feel like that might be your weakness, if that might be your struggle, where you're like, man, I'm actually pretty good at listening, I actually have fun on gigs and everything, but I still feel like I'm too stiff. That's a very common thing, where maybe weak hand is too stiff, or maybe you've got a speed wall and you're not able to get to a certain level, or when you play loud, this happens, or when you play softly, this happens. A lot of those issues stem from grip. And so if you can master the fundamentals of grip, that will solve everything else. It'll literally make everything else you ever do on the drums easier. So if that's you, download that guide I told you about back at the beginning of the video, the Fast Fluid Hands Checklist. Unlock your hands for maximum speed, volume, control, and 4 easy to follow steps. This guide is great because it has screenshots of my grip and what I'm doing, and it's just check boxes of do this, do that, make sure you're aware of this, aware of that. So you can make sure that you're doing these things right and getting your hands loose. And so definitely go check out that guide. That's going to help you a lot and give you very specific, concrete things to practice, very specific action steps that will get your grip doing what it needs to do so the sticks are moving naturally. So if you download that guide, if you work through that, get your grip happening, then go back through all the action steps, all the steps we talked about in today's lesson, you are going to be in really good shape. Your time is going to be so much better than mine was when I was first getting started, because it took me a while to figure this out. So, hey, let me figure it out for you. Here it is. Do these things. You can be the drummer that you are made to be, being solid, being the drummer everybody wants to play with and that everybody enjoys playing with, because you're easy to play with and easy to groove with, because you have a great pocket that feels good. That's important. And it all starts with hands. And then from there, it all starts with listening. And so grip, listening, those are the two big things. So go do that. You can do this. I believe in you. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, if this was the first non-glamorous lesson you saw, be sure to subscribe. I hope you'll go deeper with me. I hope you'll download that guide, because I want to help you out as much as possible with this, because I believe you're capable of a lot more than you might think you are. Because drumming it's a very learned skill. There's a lot of things you have to learn, and even if you feel like you weren't born with the talent, you can learn these things, you can master them, you can become the drummer you're made to be and reach your full potential. So thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you're new, download that guide. Stay non-glamorous. I'll see you on the next lesson.